I really do think that Las Vegas is the greatest city in the world, without question.
That is the key point.
Conservation isn't some yes-no thing. It's not a yes, we're doing the most, or no, we're doing nothing at all.
This is the single most important issue that Las Vegas and Nevada faces.
You might hear my kid in the background crying.
He's crying about the injustice. The one thing we have is everything. Like, seriously, those two things can't be together. Our core mission can't be accomplished, right? As a city.
Clip that.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to a podcast with Cameron Belt. Cameron Belt is the senior economist over at RCG Economics. He's also a fellow with Club for Growth, and he sits on the board of directors for Keystone Corporation here in Nevada. And this is also my best friend. So we're going to be having a conversation about Vegas, what it means to grow up here, experience Las Vegas as a city, also what our future looks like, some of the challenges that we're facing as a city. I know of no better guy to talk about these subjects than him. I think he gave over 30 speeches last year, presentations and speeches. Is that right?
It was about 30 over the last 2 years, I think is what it is. Yeah, so it was about 13 last year and a few more this year. It's already just February and I've done 4. So
wow. Okay. So numerous organizations are looking to him to be the expert in Nevada, our economy, and all things that we got going on here. So I wanted to start by asking you the question, why do you think Las Vegas is so appealing to so many people, especially Californians, and why are they choosing to call it home?
Well, it's attractive for a lot of different reasons. It's hard to boil it all down to one thing, right? If we sit here and we say, why is it attractive for Californians? It's because California is outrageously expensive, right? Without question, and Nevada's not. What's great about Nevada, though, is more than just the cost of living or anything else. We're a pretty unique city. I tell people, I really do think that Las Vegas is the greatest city in the world, without question. There's a lot of things that we don't have, but what I will say is, and it's one of my taglines I've come up with a long time ago, the one thing we have is everything. Like, seriously, we really do. Sports, we've got it. Outdoors, we've got it. We even have snow sometimes. Not every single year, but it happens. So the thing is, if you want something, if you're into something, if you're interested in something, Vegas is a great place to be, but it's also a great place to call home. We're a really interesting kind of mixing pot of a lot of different areas, a lot of different ideas. And for the most part, we like to let people just do what they want with their lives, right? For the most part.
Used to be more, but
it used to be a lot more. And that's where we goes into the history, right? And both of us growing up here, both of us having family that's lived here since the 30s.
Yeah.
We've seen both how great things are. We've also seen how good they could be, right? And how great that they can be, and how we've lost some of those things growing up. But I think in general, a lot of people want to be here because we have sunshine year round.
Yep.
Right? We do have some
it's February.
It's February right now, which is absolutely ridiculous that we're outside. We do have some cold when it happens, right? But I'll say this, I love to golf, and I can golf pretty much any month of the year and not be barred from it. It might suck in January when it's real cold, but doesn't mean I can't do it. So I think there's a lot of reasons for Las Vegas to be attractive, right? Just from a personal standpoint. From a business standpoint, we do have a very attractive climate for a lot of other reasons too, compared to other states, especially California. Lower taxes in general, different types of taxes. There's no warehouse tax here. There's a lot of different things that exist here that don't exist elsewhere. And I like to keep that in forefront of my mind as well.
What do you think is something that people won't experience or come to understand about Las Vegas until they've lived here for a little bit?
There's 2 things that I'll say. The first one is the quality of service at not just the hotels, but any restaurant you go to in the city. I've gone all over the country, lots of different places. I'm not going to name any names of cities because I'm not going to put a place on blast, but there's some other cities that I've gone to where the service that you get in just a small restaurant or whatever is just absolutely abysmal. And it's not just that one, it's kind of everywhere. And so when you're there and you've grown up here and you've grown up to an established, kind of standard, you don't realize how kind of not great it is elsewhere. Right? That's one thing. I think the other thing that people don't realize is how small the city is and how close the city can be and how nice the general population is to each other in walking through different areas. It's not everywhere. It's not always, right? But it's definitely more common than other decently large metros. And we're a metro of like almost 2.8 million people or so, 2.3 or whatever it is. Throughout the state we're 2.8. Down here it's a little bit less than that, about 2.5 I think. But I'm like 3 degrees of separation away from anybody, is what it comes down to, right? If we think about it, there's any number of the A-listers that exist in Vegas that I probably have a 1 degree, if not 2 degrees separation from, which is kind of wild.
Everyone that I move in says it takes about 2 or 3 years, and then once they find their niche and they connect with people, it seems like it's just the best network that they've ever formed.
Without question. I think it's a lot of intangible stuff, right?
Yep.
You can't, it's knowledge and it's experience that you can't really put into numbers, which is what's important sometimes. Numbers are important, but there's also a lot of this world that's more human that's you can't really quantify.
Yep. So I have 2 big issues. I think you tend to agree on these 2 big issues. And one of them everyone talks about. I think it's turned into a bit of a scapegoat. And the other one, I don't think enough people are talking about. It's become a little bit more of a hot topic over the last couple years. I think it is the most critical thing that we suggest rise to the top of what we look at in terms of policy and legislation and everything. And so the first one is water. I think it's become a scapegoat, but I want to hear your opinion. And then the second thing is land, which we're going to discuss too, and land availability, federally owned land, all that stuff. So water, is it a real constraint on Nevada's future, Las Vegas's future, or is it a scapegoat that people are using to blame for other issues that exist?
It's a really important question to kind of understand. And so on a broad sense, is it a constraint? Well, everything's a constraint to some extent, right? We can't just all of a sudden put an ocean in the middle of Las Vegas. We're constrained by that. But is it something that we need to be actively worried about is a different question, in my opinion. And what I think is it's a concern, but it's not a problem. It's something we should be aware about, but it isn't something that should be completely changing every policy that we have throughout all of our branches of, especially Southern Nevada's government, right? As of right now, Las Vegas, Nevada specifically, has the lowest allocation of water from any of the Colorado Basin states, both upper and lower, right? I think it's like 1.8%.
It's tiny.
1.8% is allocated to Nevada, which is just absolutely wild. Now, here's the thing. While we have the smallest allocation, we have taken and enacted the most aggressive and extreme measures. And we are pointing ourselves towards a North Star goal of having the lowest gallons per capita per day out of any other area. And it's kind of wild that we're setting ourselves to a standard that seems to, in my opinion, almost self-sacrificial.
Yeah.
Right. We're making cuts. We're putting things in place that are potentially unnecessary.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for it, whatever else. I'm not too sure all the internal politics or anything else, but I can literally say that Las Vegas's name it's the Meadows.
Totally.
And we've taken what is a meadow, what was a desert oasis, and turned it into a barren desert.
Yep. To your point, I think this is the best way to look at this. If we cut half of our water usage, which would be insane. Yeah. So let's say we cut half of our water usage, we would be impacting less than 1%, less than 1% of the overall river water usage. So us conserving, it doesn't, we could go to 100% of our water. We could just get rid of all of our water and it wouldn't impact the water that's coming from the Colorado River in any meaningful way. We have to look at the abusers of water, which in my opinion is California.
The way I think about this is, and it helps to have like kind of like a visualization almost. Let's say you take all of the water that Nevada gets and you put it into a bucket. We get 1 bucket of water. Okay. That's our allocation. It's 300,000 acre feet per year, 0.3 million acre feet per year. California has 14 times that. You could literally take 1 bucket of the same amount of water that Nevada gets, take it from California, put it into Nevada, and we double our allocation and we hit theirs by less than, I think it's 5 to 6%. And it doesn't have to be all from there either, right? You can take this and reallocate it across. Arizona has, I think, I'm trying to remember, maybe it's 7 times or at least 8 times, right around there, what we have. You know, it's, in reality, we're trying to, and this is an analogy that I used when I was at Uber and Lyft a lot, in terms of trying to help direct our strategies.
Mhm.
I used to say, hey, when it came to our drivers, we were really trying to figure out how to get more driver hours.
Yeah.
We were really trying to figure out how to get more out of these people in order to drive. Like, how could we get more hours, right? And I had to explain to the people who sat all the way in San Francisco, the people who weren't in my market, the people who weren't seeing what drivers were putting in day to day, what they were sacrificing. I had to say, you've squeezed the lemons enough. You need more lemons.
Yep.
Nevada has over squeezed our lemons. We're bleeding now. We're squeezing so hard. I think we're now drying our own blood to some extent.
Totally agree with you.
Because what? We're not allowed to have evaporative cooling. We're not allowed to have non-functional turf, whatever that actually means.
Yep.
We're the only state in the entire US that has designated turf as non-functional and non-essential, and it may have killed off 100,000 trees.
Killed off 100,000 trees and made our valley hotter. So now you know, if you're concerned about warming and the climate warming, you've now taken away all the grass that cools the surrounding
Yes.
area, all the trees that were impacted by that grass removal that cooled the surrounding area. It's been so damaging. And I think that people need to understand how severe California is in this overall picture. We recycle 99% of our indoor water usage. California is the exact opposite.
Yes.
They recycle a total of 1% of their indoor water usage. The runoff is so terrible.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, we don't need to double our allocation.
Right.
We don't need it.
Right.
So even if we, you know, impacted California 5 or 6%, we need 50,000 more acre feet of water. 100,000 acre feet of water would drastically change the picture.
Yes.
And we've also given so much power to Southern Nevada Water Authority
Yes.
that they've just come in and abused the people of Las Vegas in a way that no other utility company in the country has. They have such extreme power over us because of this situation where we are the best actors. We are the best conservers. We use less water now than we did in 2007 as a city.
Yeah.
That's an astonishing figure.
And we've grown by 800,000 people.
Right.
Right. It's not even just less water. It's less water per. It's insane where the measures we've taken, and it's a testament to a lot of interesting things. The first thing it's a testament to is technology's role in all of this.
Right.
Technology has allowed for water savings to come through at a higher level than was ever expected 20 years ago. You know, we are on the forefront of water conservation, not just action, but active technology, both the resorts and the golf courses.
Yep.
Right. The water authority has sat back and penalized the golf courses. They've actually said you're not allowed to have any more new golf courses throughout the city,
yep.
right? Which I get it, but the problem is they are literally the most efficient water users in the valley. And if you look at a presentation from a few years back, they have a waterfall chart of how we're going to go from, I think it was 115 or gallons per capita per day down to this goal of 86 by 2035, which, by the way, 86 is vastly less than any other major metro.
Right.
Vastly less. We're looking to cut ourselves by 50%. We're the smallest allocation, again, 1.8%. We're looking to reduce our usage by 50, when other metros like Arizona, Phoenix, like Southern California are maybe 20%. Why would the smallest allocation be taking the biggest cuts?
Yep.
It just doesn't make sense. Now, from a political, I can sit back here and we can talk numbers or anything else, and there's realities of politics. There's realities of, you know, agreements across other state lines. A lot of this is backdoor, right? So much of this is involved with people who are appointed rather than elected.
That is the key point. These are people who we did not elect that are representing us on one of our most critical things in Las Vegas. We didn't elect these people. They've been appointed. They have no responsibility to the voice of the people, the concerns of the people. They're just doing this out of power.
Well, and I think what's crazy is just the change in strategy over time too. Before we talked, I wanted to sit down and I grabbed the most recent water resource plan from the SNWA. And then I also just went to find the first historical one that I could find. And the first one that popped up was 09. And I had a basic question that I wanted to ask, and it was, how has the general strategy changed? In particular, related to securing additional water rights. It doesn't exist in the 26 plan. It was at least discussed in 09, and it may have been discussed a few years after that. I haven't looked at all of them, right? I just wanted to get one real quick snapshot. The fact that it's not discussed now seems like a complete lack of judgment on what really truly matters.
Right.
And again, that's from the outside looking in. That's me just asking questions on why are we making these choices,
Yeah.
right? And I can't sit here and question their numbers. They're hydrologists, there's water, water scientists and people who study this. And I'm just an economist, but I will say, when it comes to understanding the underlying logic, it doesn't make sense. Because on one hand, I've been in meetings and I've seen individuals from the Water Authority tell people from out of state. I was at a conference where the chief editor for Site Selection magazine was there, and he was sitting at our lunch table, and we were talking, and he and I were having a good discussion, and a representative from the Water Authority piped up real fast and said, "Hey, did you know that we're the most water safe metro in the entire western US?" And he was talking on and on and on about that. Right before the site selector guy sat down with me, he was telling me how badly situated we were in terms and why we need to do all these things. And so on one hand, you can't say to people outside, we're doing great, and then turn around and tell everybody internal to the state, actual Las Vegans, that we're all going to die, that we're just going to plaster all of this all around everywhere. It doesn't make sense to me. You can't be saying two things at the same time. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't be aware that, hey, don't let your water hose just go into the gutter. There's a difference between that. My dad was actually at the Water Authority when they started talking about water conservation in the late 90s. And we had I remember growing up here, we had the stupid little, it was like a timer for your shower. So it was like the little sand timer, little hourglass where I had it in my wall and would flip it over, and that's how long my shower should last.
Yep.
So that way I wasn't wasting water. Conservation.
Yeah, we grew up with it.
Conservation isn't some yes, no thing. It's not a yes, we're doing the most, or no, we're doing nothing at all. There's degrees in the middle of this. And we're just choosing for some reason to, again, take the most aggressive stance possible.
So you mentioned evaporative cooling ban.
Yeah.
And I think that is the most aggressive stance possible. We for those who don't know, because it's not really widely reported yet, they have banned evaporative cooling for all of Las Vegas. What that means is that all large industrial, commercial warehouses, distribution centers, and hotels and casinos, those can no longer use evaporative cooling. So the consequence of that is you now have to, if you're going to develop something like that, you have to use AC, HVAC.
Yeah, mechanical cooling. Yeah.
Which is essentially impossible for distribution centers.
Yes.
You cannot cool distribution centers. You might hear my kid in the background crying.
He's crying. He's crying about the injustice of having to not use evaporative cooling centers and not having real grass in his backyard to play on, because as a result of the real grass being next to their AC mechanical cooler, it now costs Zach more money in utility bills. That's why he's distraught at the age of 3.
Yeah.
He's distraught with this fact. No, but you're absolutely right. I mean, and what's funny about the mechanical cooling versus the evaporative cooling, my family was on the forefront of bringing evaporative cooling to the city.
Yeah.
My great-grandfather literally started what is now still the oldest licensed mechanical contractor in the state of Nevada.
Yeah.
It was a sheet metal company that he turned into an evaporative cooling HVAC company, right?
Yep.
Payhor Mechanical.
Well, it's what allowed Las Vegas to be developed so distribution centers, if you have a warehouse with the door wide open and you're bringing in trucks and you're loading up trucks and the doors are wide open in 120-degree heat in Las Vegas, you cannot cool it with AC.
No.
You have to have evaporative cooling. It's the only way to maintain a relatively cool temperature. So with onshoring or nearshoring, with Canada and Mexico becoming our trade partners, rather than China being our main trade partner, you have these routes that are developing and already established where Las Vegas is a hub for distribution, warehousing, and potentially manufacturing. They're fast-growing industries, or could be even faster-growing industries in Las Vegas. And so when you wipe out evaporative cooling, we now no longer have the potential to take over that market share and grow as a city, diversify as an economy, build up our wealth, and allow for our population to increase its standard of living. On top of hotels and casinos and other major venues no longer being able to be built in a cost-effective manner, they have to have such a large profit model and vision that they have to include AC in their business plan, rather than it being, a much cheaper build with evaporative cooling.
Yeah, one of the things that I like to call out when it comes to whatever policies, prohibitions, bans, they don't make sense ever. It's very rare. We're talking, about economic policy. We're not talking about like civil stuff. Like you should ban murder, you should ban things like theft, you should ban those kinds of things without question. But when it comes to a policy that bans certain types of actions, like no evaporative cooling, what it does is it completely forgets that technology can change and also what the future could hold. So when my great grandfather, Emil Peor, brought evaporative cooling here, the technology that existed then is vastly different than the technology that exists now. So the water usage, the water consumption from evaporative cooling is different now than it was just a few years ago when they put this ban into place.
Yeah.
And so when you enforce these things, you stop for the option for new changes to come in to
Yep.
dictate new ways for us to do this. And so the problem is that with at least water, we've gotten to a point where we are optimizing. And again, I'm an economist. Sorry, let me just say sorry for using the word optimize. But what we're doing is we care about one variable,
Yep.
one condition, water usage, and then we allow everything else in the system
Yeah.
to potentially degrade
Totally.
so that we can hit that one target.
Yeah, here's a great example of that. The off-put of AC units is 150 degrees or more into
Right.
the atmosphere. The off-put of evaporative cooling is 80, 90 degrees.
Yes.
So now we're going to have these parking lot size areas of Las Vegas off-putting 150 degree
Yes.
heat rather than 80, 90 degree heat
Yes.
into the atmosphere. Unintended consequence. You're like water restriction. Now you're heating up the environment even
Yes.
more on top of everything else.
One of my favorite. There's two books I can point to here, and again, because I'm a nerd, I can talk about different books. But one of them is by Henry Hazlitt. It's called Economics in One Lesson,
Mhm.
and then the next one is by Thomas Sowell called Applied Economics, and it's Thinking Beyond Stage One. Both those books, if you're going to read one, read Hazlitt's because it's shorter and it was the standard for economics education for about half a century, if not longer, in America. But the whole thing there is you have to understand what the impact of a policy change is going to be across all people, across all times, right? Or the way Sowell puts it is you have to think about the next step. You have to think beyond, if I do this, sure, I gain this result. But as a result of this, these next 5 things happen. The problem is too often when it comes to public discussions and public decision making, we'll look at the benefits of these decisions. We will never look at the costs. The costs don't get estimated. And there's one big reason for it. It's because it's hard. It's really hard for us to sit back and understand what the world would have looked like had we not decided something, right?
Yeah.
Economists call it counterfactual.
We're gonna move on to the next big issue, which is federal land. So the federal government owns over 90% of southern Nevada's land. It owns over 80% of Nevada's land.
Huh.
I think that the federal government's treatment of Nevada has been so terrible. And the stat that I've used and stuff we've done publicly and shared is, most people think when they hear about nuclear weapons that only 2 nuclear bombs have ever been dropped, Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
No.
Just outside of Las Vegas, over 950 bombs, nearing 1,000 nuclear bombs were detonated in the desert of Nevada.
Yep.
So they obliterated our desert. And then how do they repay us for that? They give us Yucca Mountain.
That's right.
Decades later. They're like, you know what? Now you're the nuclear waste depository of the entire country. So they nuke us. They nuke us, and then they put in Yucca Mountain.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't really understand, these bombs weren't like way far out in the desert. They weren't.
Our grandparents used to go watch them on field
They used to
trips.
watch them.
Yeah.
My grandmother remembers being able to look out of Las Vegas High classroom out the window, seeing a mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
Right? From her window. It's not like this was super remote. Anytime I travel from Vegas to Reno, I drive by where this happened, right? every single time. My grandfather, after he proposed to my grandmother, because she was going up in Reno at the University of Nevada, shout out University of Nevada, not University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Anyways, no, I'm just joking. Go Wolfpack. In any case, he went in and proposed to my grandmother, and on the way back home, as he's driving by the test site, boom, bomb goes off as he's driving. So the craziness of this isn't just that like this happened in Nevada. It happened on our doorsteps, essentially, right? Our grandparents' doorsteps. It was stuff that we saw actively.
So let me just clarify. This doesn't mean that I'm against nuclear energy.
No.
I'm actually a very big proponent of nuclear energy, and I think that's going to be the way of affordable energy in the future. I think it's become much safer since the 1970s and all of that as well. I'm just painting the picture of what the federal government has done to Nevada over the course of our history, especially Las Vegas. And now they own so much of our land. Essentially, if you're looking at a map of Las Vegas and you see here's the outskirts of Las Vegas. And as soon as you go outside of the outskirts, it's all Bureau of Land Management land, BLM land. And so we are encompassed, and we are essentially only able to grow when they give us pieces of land every so often in an auction that they sell to us. And really they sell to large home builders who are willing to pay a premium, or other major developers who can pay the premium. That disallows affordable housing because it's expensive land. It doesn't allow for industries like manufacturing, warehousing, industrials to come into Las Vegas as well, or any other business opportunities that the private sector would see fit for the land. We can't do it because they own it. So they are controlling our economic destiny, our prosperity, and our housing affordability by limiting the land. I think this is the single most important issue that Las Vegas and Nevada faces, is the federal government's ownership of our land. And until we get control of our land, we do not control our destiny. We will not have affordable housing, period, until we get our land. We will not have economic diversification, which will be so beneficial for our economy. We won't have all of these incredible things until we can control our destiny and control our land.
No, I agree. Yeah, no, 100%.
There we go.
I mean, within it, there's a big question around just what exactly are we specifically talking about. It's gotten kind of a lot of attention on social media lately too. When people fly in and out of Vegas, they have like these little reactions of like, no, but really Vegas just stops, right? They're like, what the hell? This is very odd, right? And it is odd. It's odd because we're not allowed to kind of expand in a way that we choose, right? To put this into context, because the federal government owns so much of our land, in order for us to get it, this is anywhere. And in order for anybody to buy a piece of land or parcel from the BLM, not just in Nevada, but kind of anywhere, you have to go through a congressional appropriations process, which can be super long. It can be very tedious. It's very costly, right? We benefit from a certain policy here in Southern Nevada called the Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act. It's SNPLMA is what it's kind of commonly, affectionately referred to. It's one of the worst acronyms in all of the government, but SNPLMA, yeah. Say that 4 times fast, whatever it is. No, but in reality, what it allows for is, it was set in the late 90s, and Senator Richard Bryan and also Harry Reid at the time both worked on this to make it go through. And the goal was to be able to pre-authorize the sale of a lot of land, just to kind of carve out a kind of a big circle around Las Vegas and be like, hey, we're growing fast. We want to keep growing. We can't deal with this chunking of land over time. So let's pre-authorize. At that point, I think it was 65,000 acres around the valley, and allow that to kind of go through a different type of process, right? It's a little bit more expedited. There still is hurdles to jump through, but it also comes with some kind of drawbacks as well, because anytime that land is then disposed throughout given away or sold, not given away, sold within this boundary, which is they call the disposal boundary, that money from the proceeds of that it stays here in state. Some of it goes to the school, some of it goes to the water authority, right? But a good portion of it goes to conservation efforts,
right,
to buying land for the BLM to buy throughout the rest of the state of Nevada, to set aside for conservation, which means for not development. And we as Nevada, we are the leaders in land conservation in the US.
Yeah. So I'm going to interpret what you just said and tell me if I'm correct. That every time there is land released, more land is conserved.
Yes, that's correct. As of right now, actually, since the enactment of Simplema, I think throughout the state of Nevada, the BLM owns more land than it did before.
So what you're saying is we've conserved and given the federal government more, or there's more land conserved?
At least it's under ownership.
Wow.
And that's a good question, good distinction.
So
I'll say this: whenever it comes,
it's conserved. There's more land not available for development since its enactment.
I believe so. Yes. Well, yeah, without question, that's correct. Yes. And so the whole idea here is, what are those lands that are being conserved? And let me put this straight. I'm not against conservation, right? I'm not against setting things aside. I love Sloan Canyon. Going
Right.
out,
Not black or white.
yeah,
That's the same
going out
thing.
to Sloan
Yeah.
Canyon and seeing the petroglyphs that have been out there, some of the oldest petroglyphs, I think, definitely in North America, if not like the world. It's insane to see that, and it's
Mhm.
awesome to see that. And internally, I feel kind of conflict seeing houses get so close to it, but it also increases access because before I had to park and then hike all the way in. So it's back and forth on this. Again, there's no black or white, 1 or 0 on this. But what it comes down to is our city has had to grow under some very weird constraints that many other cities have never had to grow under, right? Water being one of them, right? But really, what it comes down to is the fact that the BLM, the federal government, owned all the land around us. We couldn't grow in a manner that made sense, really. That's why if you're in Las Vegas and you're driving down, let's say Buffalo, and you all of a sudden run into the side of Spanish Trails,
Mhm.
right? It's because Spanish Trails developed before everything else because they just happened to get that land from the federal government, so they built houses there and they went through that. Why does our city look like the way it does with suburbs on the outside that are just kind of dense with no other urban cores? It's because those developers who were building didn't know what was coming next or when, so they couldn't really have a vision. Corporations like Howard Hughes have been able to have that because they were
'Cause they
able
had
to
the land.
so
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
That's the benefit of when you have land that you're able to kind of figure things out on. You can see the type of community that gets developed as a result of
So what you're saying is the people who had the land, Green Valley and Summerlin, have turned out to be the best neighborhoods in Las Vegas.
Yeah, it does look
in
that
a lot
way.
of people's eyes.
It does look that way, doesn't it?
So when there's the ability to develop, you get a little bit better living environment.
When you have people with vision and then they have the means to act on that vision, really cool things come through.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Strip. Look what Steve Wynn did, right? Vision. We have what we have now because of that. And then the other piece of this, and I said there's a couple different constraints that we had to grow up as a city that other cities didn't really have to consider. And one of them is zoning as well. Zoning and land use, right? Not only do we need to worry about how much land is available, I need to worry about what I'm able to do with the land that I do have, right? And so putting this into context, and this is kind of an early preview of an article I'm putting together right now, just a high level op-ed, is just explaining Las Vegas grew. We're a very young metro. If you compare us to San Diego, to San Francisco, to New York, to Chicago, we're not old. We're a very young city. And with that comes some interesting things. Zoning wasn't really introduced until in the US until like the 50s or a little bit there, right around there. And that was when we started to grow. Most major metros were able to grow and establish themselves with an identity within the first 50 years of their life without having everything being overtly planned,
Mm-hmm.
right? And being just like set in stone and saying you're allowed to do this or not allowed to do that. Our city, unfortunately, did not get to grow that way. It's very, 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 even Phoenix is older than us. And Phoenix had this, which is kind of modeled as like the master plan city in a lot of ways. It has more going on because it's been less kind of controlled in that way. Now, I'm not saying there's anything completely inherently wrong with having land uses that are compatible and having some things, we don't want a strip club next to an elementary school or a cannabis, place next to a church. But that being said, that doesn't have to come through with minimum parking requirements. It doesn't have to come through with required setbacks. It doesn't have to come through with all these different
Parking
standards.
requirements are a huge issue with affordable housing too.
Huge issue.
So actually, I want to touch on this. What do you think the impact of zoning, regulations, and federal ownership of land, and pick which one you think is most important? What's the impact on affordable housing here in Las Vegas? And
there's so many different factors that factor into the situation we have right now with housing. So to give a little bit of context, at least recently, year over year, housing prices, as of November, I know right around now, about flat, if not slightly down, right throughout the metro. let's zoom out just 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 2020, we're up 40% in pricing in just 5.5 years, right? That's insane. 40% growth is wild. The problem with that is our wages haven't kept up nearly enough, right? So when we ask this question of what has federal ownership done, what has, zoning done, what has all these factors together, it's done a lot. It's challenged it really, really.
Limited supply.
It's limited supply. And also, if you look at this, I got a good colleague of mine, Dr. Sean McCoy out of the UNLV Lead Center for Real Estate Studies. They put out a quarterly report not too long ago that showed the dramatic decrease in housing permits that came through following the Great Recession. And we pulled back to the point where right now we are short 100,000 units in terms of affordable units throughout the state. If we had maintained the relative trend of where we were prior to the Great Recession, now, don't get me wrong, at that point, we were oversupplied for a certain amount of time, but our building has fallen off of a cliff and never recovered. It would have been about 100,000 units over that time frame that would have been built had we kept that pace.
Yeah. You know what's crazy is this last year, so December to December, permits pulled is down 20% too.
Yeah.
So we're about to do it again.
Yeah.
Because new home builders are going, okay, I'm not going to make all this money. I'm going to slow my pace a little bit. I'm still going to build, but I'm going to slow my pace. So we're down 20% again in permits pulled at an already ridiculously low number.
And the other piece to that too is that there's some state stuff that also is specific that has an effect on the supply. Because when we talk about housing, it's not just single family residences. There's also, single family attached, and there's also multifamily as well. We've got a really interesting situation where, the multifamily also hasn't been constructing nearly enough, but you need a big piece of land for most of that stuff, right? You need a lot. If we look at the vacant land within all of unincorporated Clark County that still exists, that's vacant, I think it's 75 to 80% of it is zoned single family. We're not going to get rid of 100,000 unit shortage by having only single family homes. We have to have product differentiation and product variability out there, right? And one of the things that has impacted this, from what I've been told from housing builders, is that missing gap that we have is like the single family attached, right? The duplexes, the triplexes. There's such a lack of supply here, and a lot of it comes as a result of policies that came through at the Nevada legislature following the Great Recession due to construction defect laws, specifically for those types of properties. And they became so strict that developers are pulling back any interest in doing that whatsoever. And so as a result of that, we're seeing a decrease in available supply. Yeah, everybody's dream should be to have a single family home, but I think most people's dreams is just to have a roof over your head that you don't have to spend more than 30% of your income on. And what we should have is more supply, more varied supply, and open up the gates for that more. But we've got barriers in the way. And the problem is some of the barriers are really difficult for us to do anything about.
So let me ask you this after that. Do you think that our housing crisis that we're facing is because of pricing? Is it because of interest rates, or is it because of lack of supply?
Oh, I think that it's a combo. If I were to weight the factors, I think lack of supply is probably the single biggest factor. I think that interest rates do have an effect, right?
Historically, we're below average.
We are. But interest rates have an effect to some extent, right?
Totally. I'm in agreement.
Yeah. And also our wage growth also has a huge impact, right? Because interest rates can go up, but as long as your wages are outpacing that, perfect. But I can tell you right now that our increase in wages hasn't kept up with the all of a sudden ratcheting up effect of interest rates, right? Yep. Especially in Southern Nevada, which already kind of lags behind. On a real basis, over the last, since 2019, real wages, inflation adjusted wages are only up about 5%. Nationally, it's about 6 to 7. So we're a little bit behind there too. But our home appreciation is growing faster, right? And so it's a myriad of effects, but I would say that the lack of supply, which can be driven by lack of land, also driven by what you're allowed to do with that land, or the incentives that are created from policies that allow people to develop it in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Rather than what we want it to be. There's a big difference here. I think that for the most part, most government policies are well-intentioned. I'm just going to say this because I don't know every single politician, every single bureaucrat out there. I like to look at people and assume that they have positive intent because I can't prove otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay. But I like to say the result of this positive intentions of these policies is clearly not something that we want.
Here's a great and I don't know if this is true, so the internet's going to have to fact check me 100%. But when I was talking with a construction guy, he said that he could build just the multifamily for ownership between 170 and $200,000 per door. So he could build per door for 170 to $200,000. When you added in the parking requirements, it went up to like $350,000 because of the land that was required,
Yeah.
the additional costs, everything. It astronomically jumped. So now instead of being able to sell for this price, they have to sell for this price, or
Yeah.
construct for this price, they have to construct for this price. You know, it's tough. And obviously I get you have to have parking, but the setbacks, the parking, everything, it's getting crazy, and there's no solutions available. I mean, you know, especially with things like robo taxis and all
Yeah.
that coming in. I mean, who knows? Right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors that play in here. I think, you know, what's interesting when it comes to multifamily stuff, and this is talking to somebody who I know that's a friend of both of ours, who happens to do a decent amount with some construction work and also some multifamily and single family residential. I had asked him because he had just worked on one of the newest high rises here in town, and I said, hey, why is it so hard to build multifamily that's affordable? And he said, well, because for the most part, for multifamily, the big costs that really separate out how much each unit costs is two things: the bathrooms and then also the stoves, the kitchens and the bathrooms. If you're requiring every single unit to have those two things, there's no reason for me not to build Class A. There's no reason for me to not go after luxury, become the new standard, and then push everything else that exists down a peg. Because that's just the fixed cost of putting those things in there.
So you're saying communal.
I'm saying there's a possibility of it.
So you're saying that if we're really looking for entry level stuff, because we've talked about this before, like the entry level house in the 1950s was 900 square feet.
Right.
Entry level house now 1,600 square
Right.
feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 4-bedroom, 2-bath.
Right. With
So-
AC, with
Yeah.
this, with that, right? Yeah.
So we've added a standard of living that's much different than before,
Right.
as well. So who do you think is benefiting from the current housing situation, and who do you think is going to get left behind?
The people who are benefiting are those who already have houses. I mean, there's people out there who will sit back and so much of their net worth is tied into their house, right? That they don't want to see prices decrease in general. And as a result of that, anything that comes through that, hey, if we increase supply dramatically enough, housing values in general could come back down a little bit, right? Unless we're getting different supply out there.
Yeah.
And then we're creating a different type of market with a different type of thing. And so when you do that, you'll start to see some benefits potentially come through. We can't just make it all just one or nothing. We have to allow for variation. We have to allow for different types of thinking. Like, I don't know, I go to these other cities, I go to other countries, and I look at some of the product offerings that they have, and I'm like, this is super cool development. Why don't we have anything like this here in Vegas? I saw some stuff in Germany, which you can't really say, oh, it's a product of them being old, because the areas that I was in were pretty new developed because everything got bombed. So, like, for the most part, a lot of their development has occurred since the 50s too, right? And they've got different types of setups going on. They've got different types of units. They've got different types of, ways of building communities, and their streets are narrower. I mean, that's one of the big things too, that again, one of our friends brought up to me is just how wide all of our residential streets are throughout our neighborhoods. How much are we wasting to just forcing wide streets when it's absolutely not necessary? The problem is with most of these zoning issues and most of these parking requirements and everything else is, and don't get me wrong, I think that the people who are in charge of zoning and planning and everything else are given an impossible task.
Mhm.
They're asked to plan the land use of an entire city.
Yeah.
Like how there's a great book called Arbitrary Lines by a guy named Nolan Gay, I believe is what it is, that goes through and talks about the history of zoning, and also he's getting his PhD in public planning. So he's like one of them, kind of saying a lot of this doesn't make sense. And what they've come to is really just describing this fact that, like, we're planning for high capacity usage.
Yeah.
If you look at any strip mall and you say, how much traffic would come through here on Black Friday? And then you build the parking to be able to satisfy that capacity, you're going to have too much capacity the rest of the year. If you were to sit here and say in this community, what would happen if the community is all of a sudden going up in flames? How many cars would have to drive through? Well, it's great for us to be able to plan for that situation, but in the process, we're giving up everything else. And so I don't think that we have to standardize this as much as we do. Maybe Toll Brothers decides to do it and they make it a feature of their property, right? And then somebody else chooses not to. Lennar chooses to do something different.
Right.
We're forcing everything to be so constrained and cookie cutter that we don't get variation anymore, which is just really unfortunate. The market does a really good job with this stuff.
Yeah. Like hospitals don't plan for pandemics all the time. Their operating capacity, which is why pandemics were a problem,
Yes.
are much different. They don't plan for max capacity. So there's other industries that don't plan for max capacity in their development of their business plans.
The market generally doesn't have idle resources sitting by.
Right.
Right. That's a good thing. That leads to
Efficiency.
right. Having idle resources in normal situations, the market is very anti that. Now, if you ask Keynes, it's a different story, but we won't go into that. But in any case, idle resources are not a feature of the market. They're a feature of planning. They're a feature of enforced kind of situations. And sometimes, I can understand this. For myself, I have a stockpile of stuff if things happen. There's some idleness there, but I get to freely choose it. I'm I'm okay with that. If you're enforcing it, it's a big difference.
I want to touch on one more thing here that's really important to make sure we fit this in. We've discussed this a little bit before, and it's about how Vegas should develop and what's the right use of our future resources and what we have available to us. I loved the Sphere as a concept. You loved the Sphere as a concept because it was entirely new. It didn't exist anywhere else. We developed the technology and then put a product in that has revolutionized the entertainment industry. I mean, it's insane if you haven't been there. And I love things like Area 15, immersive virtual reality concepts, eateries right next door. You've got all of these cool things that are coming to Las Vegas. But then I think there's other things that just, why are we doing that? And so what's your take on that? How should we develop and what makes us unique?
So for me, I think the thing that has made Las Vegas unique throughout all of history is our willingness to redefine not only ourselves as a city, but entire categories of things, right? So if we think back historically, we were a haven for boxing because boxing was illegal everywhere else, right? It's just a fact, right? And then we became a haven for gambling because it was illegal everywhere else, right? And then we set a standard every single step of the way for this new type of thing to draw and bring people here. In general, we're a city that shouldn't exist, right? Like if we think about it, we shouldn't really be here. But what we've done is we've created an environment where everybody wants to come, and that's amazing. And we do that by having things that nobody else has. We don't do that by just taking things that everybody else has and putting it all together in one area and say, look what we got. And for me, it's this innovation is better than activity, right? It's that prosperity, which is long-term and self-sustaining, is better than just like one-offs, right? The fact that Foley came here and redefined entertainment because he brought in the Golden Knights. Boom. Now that was a redefinition for the city, but globally speaking, it was, hey, we've got it elsewhere, but we think we can make it work here. It's hockey in the desert, right? It was awesome. It was fantastic. And the stars aligned for the city to really get behind it. Another innovation, I think, so I agree with you. The Sphere is amazing. Area 15 is super cool. And I think it's only going to get better, right? Circus Swim is super cool. There's nobody else that has, an area where you can go sit back, be outside in pools, watching the biggest screens ever. And then inside is the largest sports book in the world. like the fact that you can have these things together, again, like I said, the one thing we have is everything. And what we need to do is consistently look towards that innovation, that change, those new ideas, and remove anything that gets in the way. And sometimes, not all times, but sometimes there's policies that get in the way. Right?
Give me one or two policies that you would change that you think are the most important things that we need to focus on as a city or a state so that everyone that watches can advocate for.
The first thing that I would say that I think everybody should advocate for is something that has shown a lot of promise and a lot of progress in a lot of other states already. They're called sunset laws. And what that means is I believe that Nevada should have expiration dates for its regulations. Okay? Not its laws. There's difference. There's the NRS, which is the laws and statutes that get passed by our legislators. Then there's what's called the NAC, the Nevada Administrative Code. If you're to sit down and read the Nevada Administrative Code, I think it'd take you well over 30 days of just straight reading in order to read it. It's huge. And there's things that have been on there since the 60s. And The Nevada Administrative Code isn't written by legislators. It's written by bureaucrats in order to enforce things. The problem is that nothing gets cleaned up unless there's a push to do so. Governor Lombardo did a really good job when he joined in initially into his term, excuse me, and he put through and said, hey, bring me some things to roll back. Awesome effort, and some things were rolled back. The problem is that if a new governor ever comes in and he doesn't have that same idea, I want us to be beholden to law to review a certain portion of these laws, these regulations, every so often.
Because they become antiquated.
Antiquated, completely antiquated. And all it does is it makes things difficult for us to look through. You know, if you look at a study that Cato did a few years back, in terms of barriers to entrepreneurship, Nevada ranks way higher than people think.
Right.
We're always talked about being business friendly, which from a taxation perspective, we are. But from a regulation perspective, we have a ton of work we need to do. We ranked 37th. CNBC came out, and every single year they look at business friendliness. And we have decreased every single year the past 3 years because we keep adding new things here. So I think sunset laws would be something that's really important to throw in there, right? Let's have a review process for these different codes, not just at the state level, but throughout all the local municipalities as well, because we have laws on the books now in Vegas that were written because of the mob.
Yep.
And the mob's not a factor anymore. And I can tell you this because my grandmother was there taking notes when those laws were put into effect.
Yep.
So it's just the truth that we need to, if we want Vegas to do what it does best, which is innovate and change and push the envelope, we can't have laws on the books and regulations on the books that are stuck in 30, 40, 50 years ago. Those two things can't be together. Our core mission can't be accomplished, right? As a city.
Clip that.
Yeah. That was a new one. I haven't come up with that one before, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the truth. And, you know, I think that the other thing that I can sit back and think about, man, let's see here. What is one other thing that I could advocate for?
So last question. You go 5-10 years into the future in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
What does it look like? What are the challenges? What are the things that are so awesome that if we did it right, that's how we would look as a city? I want you to a little bit compare to other cities as well. So just give us your opinion.
First off, in the next 10 years, we're expected to have about 380,000 more people move to our city, right? That's like adding another city of Henderson to our region, which is pretty wild because in that same time frame, we're going to run out of land too at current development patterns. So within 10 years, we'll likely grow, especially if we grow at the same pace we have the last 5 or so years, but we will have no more land available for us to grow further, right? My 10-year horizon is really important, but my 20-year is even more important, right? Because again, our families have been here for almost a century. Our long-term view is a little bit longer than most people's. And right now, I do see this as being a significant, serious barrier to us. This land issue, if it's not figured out, if we aren't able to get more land available to developers in private hands in Clark County, then we're going to tap out. And once we tap out, if we have all these laws and everything else in the way, we'll just start to see things exacerbate, right? We'll start to see a larger divide coming through between housing affordability and where people are, right? We're going to look more like Los Angeles than we are going to look like places in Texas, right? We're going to be challenged in this regard. Now, that's to say I'm not a pessimist. I'm actually a perennial optimist. I do think that we have some really smart people here. I do think that we have a lot of really amazing individuals who live here that are going to figure these things out, but I'd rather it be easier for them to figure out rather than harder. You know?
I agree with you. I think that if we are limited in our ability to innovate, develop, expand, advance as a city, because we are so incredibly attractive, especially when you compare us to cities in California, all of the West Coast, really. We look attractive as a city, and our future looks attractive and beautiful and bright. But if we are not able to advance in the way that we know how to advance, it could be a different picture. So I'm incredibly optimistic about the future of Las Vegas if we can do what we do best. If we are burdened by our land restrictions and some of the regulations that exist around that, zoning, permitting, everything else, I do think that we could be in a very serious situation come 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
And so I encourage everyone to become an advocate for Nevada owning its land, controlling its land, because it is what will create our beautiful, bright future.
Yeah, without question. Absolutely.
Awesome, guys. Well, I'm definitely going to have Cameron back on because I think we could go for hours and hours and hours together talking about stuff. And I know you guys find it valuable as well. So
We
we'll
should-
do it again.
We should have been recording for the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Is what it comes down to.
And I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to follow and subscribe, and we will see you on the next one.